Hi, I'm Lance Cottrell, Chief Scientist at Ntrepid, and this is the Ntrepid Cast. Cameras are everywhere, and not just the kind I'm talking into now. They're on our phones, they're on our computers, they're in stores, they're on street corners. Heck, they're even in smoke detectors and doorbells. And all of these things are capturing information about us all the time. Combine that with the amount of pictures of us being shared publicly, and we're rapidly approaching what I think of as a facial recognition singularity. Now, a singularity is basically a discontinuity in a situation. It's where the rules fundamentally change. And historically, there were two things going on. There were not that many cameras watching us, so most of the time you weren't on camera. And there weren't a lot of reference photos tied to identity. Both of those things have fundamentally changed, and it's making possible the ability to identify and track us, both online and off, everywhere we go. All of this fantastic information, because if we're not busy uploading pictures of ourselves on vacation, selfies with our friends at parties, then our friends are posting those pictures, right? Anytime you're involved in any kind of social situation, someone is probably taking and sharing photos of the event, and you don't have any control over it. When they share those photos, they usually tag them. So they're actually explicitly saying, here's a face in this photo, and here's who it belongs to. And those are going to be photos under all kinds of conditions, in dark indoor situations, outdoors, with sunglasses, with hats, in different clothes, face on, profile, right? Every kind of different position and situation, all tied back to your name, to your identity. What better training database could possibly exist for building a facial recognition system? At the same time, these devices are getting cheaper and cheaper. There's no reason to use some generic proximity detector on a device when a very cheap and tiny camera with just a little bit of logic can easily detect if there's motion going on. People are building cameras into amazing varieties of things. Right? There are cameras in toys regularly, along with microphones. My car has cameras on it. It's how we're doing self-driving. It's how stores are tracking people's movements through retail spaces. And of course, law enforcement is using them heavily on street corners to track traffic, to track crime, to track activity. So, both online and off, our face is getting captured everywhere. And it's easy to scrape these databases. A lot of these posts are public, so many different organizations can go to Facebook, Instagram, all of these other sites and pull down those photos, pull down that tagging information to train up their own facial recognition systems. And I think one of the scary things is it's likely that everyone won't do this independently. We'll probably see only a handful of companies that rise to the top in doing this kind of facial recognition, which means they'll see where you were and what your face looked like from many different sources. Right? It's not just this one store is tracking you and then another store is tracking you, but the third-party provider for both gets to see you in both places. It's kind of similar to the way online advertisers and their cookies track you throughout the internet because their ads are placed on web pages all over the place. We'll see the same thing, not just online, but also in the physical world. So fundamentally, this means the end of anonymity in the real world, much the way we've already seen it effectively in the online world. For a long time, anytime you go online, you're being tracked, you're being profiled by IP address, by cookies, by trackers, by browser fingerprint. And of course, we're volunteering it like crazy. We set up accounts, we post personal information, we post those photos. And so in the online world, they've always known who you were. The offline world, though, it was always much more anonymous. Right? You could go to a corner bookstore and browse and pay for something with cash, and in general, no one had any idea you'd been there, what books you'd looked at, what your areas of interest are. Right? That was all private to you. But if the bookstore's got cameras that recognize you, see which books you're picking up, and then share it with third parties to help monetize your presence and allow them to better track and market to you, well then you're not anonymous anywhere. And we can expect that law enforcement and other government organizations, in addition to their own cameras, may be working with some of those third parties. They'll be able to have access to that facial recognition information in the same way that they have access to LexisNexis databases and other sources of information about you, which maybe they wouldn't be allowed to collect themselves, but which they can access if some third party collected them. One of the gotchas here is that we don't really have much ability to stop it, because in general, we don't have an expectation of privacy with respect to these things. We're going into public places. We're walking down the street, we're driving in our car. If we go into a store, they have a right to be capturing images within that store. They'll probably put up a notice that it's happening. You can't pretend you didn't know that these photos were going to get taken. And we're uploading the information about ourselves and tying our identity to our face publicly online. And thousands of these posts that are tagged with your image are probably marked completely public. Anyone with an account on any of these social media sites would be able to grab that information and build that database. So we don't have an ability to push back by saying, wait a minute, I don't think you should have taken that photo, because established case law says, yeah, they pretty much can take that photo. So unfortunately, in this situation, I think we're going to be down to my least favorite solution, which is regulation. Probably the only way we're going to be able to effectively slow down this progress is by putting rules in place about how the information can be used. Cameras are just too useful. I don't think we're going to get them out of anyone's hands. We're not going to see fewer cameras pointing at us in the next 10 years, but maybe we can restrict how and where that information is turned into identifiable, trackable data, and who's allowed to have access to it. I think those laws are going to have to be very carefully crafted. Right? There's a real problem with unintended consequences, and almost every time we see Congress get involved in creating technology legislation, it tends to go pretty badly, but I don't think there's very much we can do about it, though, just for ourselves. You can try to post fewer pictures to Facebook or Instagram. You could ask your friends not to tag you in their pictures. You could try to mark things as for friends only, not for general consumption. But realistically, that is at best a delaying tactic. This data is going to be collected. It's going to get better. The machine learning based on these enormous corpus of information about you and what you look like is going to make the facial recognition more and more accurate and easier to achieve and more ubiquitous, right? This will quickly be built into everything. Why have a camera that isn't recognizing everyone who comes to your door, right? Why not know not only was a FedEx person delivering a package, but he tossed it over the fence, who was that FedEx guy? Can you go back and contact his supervisor, right? There's lots of reasons why people are going to want to have this kind of recognition information. So it's coming. The only question is, how do we put in place policy protections to help keep it from turning into a nightmare as we approach this singularity where suddenly we are all identified everywhere all the time. So, thanks for listening. If you've listened this much, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please check out the other videos on our channel. We spent a lot of time talking about both security, privacy, but mostly managed attribution. How do you go online and maintain your anonymity effectively? And as it's become clear already, that's not an easy thing to do, but we've got a lot of suggestions for how to make that possible. Please like this video, comment, we'd love to hear from you, find out what you liked about it, and subscribe to make sure that you're automatically updated each time we upload a new one.